check in at the Red Umbrella.
All right. Thank you, sir.
That way. Okay.
Zeg knapper aansteken.
car, and a couple of diesel switching locomotives. All the equipment that we operate here, with the exception of those two diesels, came from the west side of our company out in Albany, California. Say about 100 miles north of us on the other side of Yosemite. They ran a steam-powered logging operation there right up until the early 19th.
In the parking lot overnight. Better than Yosemite Valley. That's their next the one about the whole. And but the problem with that time was he was only 5 years old. So his maternal and he would put his toys in it. He'd fly us over the hotel grounds. There's his daughter, and she had it in her clothing store in a glass case up until about a year and a half, and good for the child and everything.
Oh, wow.
And
Every time I found gold, I had to dig for it.
For this trip, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. We're going to go into the history of the Madera Sugar Pine Company while we travel through the Sierra National Forest. For your safety, please remain seated while the train is moving. Please don't grab the plants. Trees have enough limbs already. Lastly, we'd like to ask that there is no smoking unless you happen to be a locomotive. Any objections? Alright, you heard all that nice and clearly, and it sounds decently, and you understand? Please, hold it. Again, please remain seated while we're moving. Thank you. Once again, welcome in. Good afternoon, everybody. Up on the left, you'll see a spur track with some old railroad equipment on it. These include an oil tank car and a couple of diesel switching locomotives. All the equipment that we operate here, with the exception of those two diesels, came from the West Side Lumber Company up to Wallaby, California, a city about 100 miles to the north of us on the other side, Yosemite. They ran a steam-powered logging operation there right up until the early 1960s. Logging in this area began in 1874 with the California Lumber Company. In 1899, the Madera Sugar Pine began their operations here, and in their 32-year history, they ran one of the largest and most successful lumber companies in the state. Their tracks we run on today. They send their operations out of the company town of Sugar Pine, located at the bottom of the Lewis Creek Canyon, about 2 miles past our end of track. Here in the upper stretches of our railroad, you'll notice everything has been burnt and broken. Start with a wildfire that came through here August 29, 2017, lasting for 2 weeks, destroying 12,000 acres of forest. Named the railroad fire due to its proximity to our location, the majority of the damage was confined to the far side of the canyon, as you can see from here. On January 19, 2021, there was a very severe windstorm. For 7 hours, there were sustained winds ranging between 60 and 150 miles an hour, knocking over literally thousands of trees. Our track crew had to cut through 62 large trees that had fallen across the tracks in order for us to resume passenger service.
Ich habe geschaut, ob ich da hinkomme, aber solchen Busch musst du durchkämpfen. Das ist fast unmöglich.
Here in the Sierra National Forest, we have
Da
5
ist
primary types
ein
of
Weg, aber
trees.
da wo der
The first is the
geschrieben ist,
California black oak.
no
It wasn't used much for lumber, but it was gathered extensively as firewood. For the lumber company's 6 wood-burning steam locomotives, their steam-powered donkey engines, and even power the mill itself. For thousands of years beforehand, however, the Native Americans in the region, known as the Miwoks, used to gather the acorns. They'd grind them up, soak them in water to remove the tannic acid. The resulting mixture was used as a flour to make cakes and cereals. It was a staple of their diet. Next, we have the incense cedar. It's the one with the rough, reddish-looking bark and the flat needles. These aromatic trees are popular for making indoor furniture, so they can retain their smell for years after being cut down, and are naturally bug-resistant. And underneath the vegetation. The third tree is the white fir. It's the gray tree with the evenly spaced horizontal branches. Similar to the red fir that can be found growing at higher elevations, you may recognize it better as a Christmas tree. We are entering into Horseshoe Curve. This curve was dug out in 1908 by a Chinese labor crew with picks and shovels. They loaded the dirt onto wheelbarrows and horse-drawn wagons and hauled it to the center of the curve, which is off to our left, where they piled it, and it remains to this day underneath the vegetation. The last 2 primary trees here in the forest are both pine trees. These are the ponderosa and the sugar pines. They're preferred by lumber companies for their immense size and excellent quality of wood, being relatively straight with few knots. The ponderosa is one with a scale-like bark and long needles that grow in groups of 3. The sugar pine has shorter needles in groups of 5 and the oversized cone. Sugar pine cones are the largest in the world, measuring in at 18 to 24 inches in length, and when green and full of sap, can weigh up to 4 pounds. By this point, you may have noticed that number 10 doesn't look like your typical side rod-driven locomotive like you see in the movies. She's what's known as a Shay locomotive. They were invented in 1876 by a Michigan lumberman named Ephraim Shay. He wanted a locomotive that was flexible and powerful, so he built one using swiveling truck assemblies connected by a line shaft running the length of the locomotive on the right-hand side, directly powering each axle. To offset the weight of the line shafts and cylinders on the right, the boiler was moved a bit to the left, giving the Shay a somewhat off-centered appearance from the front. Shays can take a 70-degree curve and climb a 12% grade with up to 20 carloads of logs. Madera Sugar Pine had 5 such locomotives, the main difference between ours and theirs being theirs burned wood, ours burn oil. In a typical trip, the number 10 here will go through about 40 gallons of fuel oil and 400 gallons of water. She was built in 1928 and weighing in at 84.5 tons, or 169,000 pounds, is the largest Shay ever built for the narrow gauge tracks. The track gauge is the distance between the 2 rails. Narrow gauge, like we operate here, is 36 inches apart, but is considered to be anything less than the standard gauge of 56.5 inches apart. A lot of lumber companies like the narrow gauge because they didn't have to cut as wide a hole through the forest to put their trains through. All 1908 to 1924. The dirt road below us on the right we'll be crossing in just a moment was the last spur used by the lumber company from 1927 up until the end of their operations in 1931. It's now a Forest Service seasonal access road.
Quindi vuol dire grosse buone.
10 Minuten von da nach. Wenn wir rausfahren, müssen wir die Straße kommen, sollte es irgendwo angeschlossen sein.
Ground cover going all over the hills around here. It is called bear clover, but the loggers called it mountain misery because it's sticky, grows everywhere, and it has a pungent odor that can take 2 or 3 washings to get out of your clothes. For the Miwoks, however, it was a medicine. They used to take bear clover and make it into a tea they would drink to cure headaches, aches, pains, and reduce fever. We now know this because the leaves are rich in acetylsalicylic acid. There's your tongue twister for the day. I did not make that word up. That is actually one of the main ingredients in aspirin. By this point, you've undoubtedly noticed the large piles of plant matter gathered throughout the forest here. These have been placed by the United States Forest Service. They decided they wanted a fire fuel break anchored off the dirt road we just crossed. So they've been selectively thinning within 150 feet of either side of the road. As much as they could, they sent to a lumber mill. Everything else was put onto these piles to be burned for removal. That was supposed to happen back in March. But we had 8.5 feet of snow on the ground. Kind of hard to find your pile, much less light it on fire under those conditions. So instead it was postponed. We don't know exactly when, Tim, but it'll probably be either this fall or next spring. Eisenbahn was one of the largest lumber companies in the state, employing approximately 800 men. They all worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. The unskilled labor was paid 10 cents an hour. Skilled labor, such as carpenters and engineers, are paid 30 cents. They give us pay raise, I make 48 cents. Lumberjacks were paid by the tree. The more they cut down, the more money they made. Every morning they'd set off into the woods with double-bitted axes and 2-man cross-cut saws they called misery whips, looking to cut down as many trees as possible for a large paycheck. Once trees were cut down, they'd be loaded onto the train by means of a donkey engine, which is a large steam-powered winch. From there, the train would head off to the mill. That trip could take several hours, depending on the distance to the mill and the number of downhill grades they had to traverse. The mill in Sugar Pine was what is known as a rough cut mill. They didn't cut the boards into what you'd find if you went to the hardware store. They brought in the trees, removed the bark, and cut them into a series of vaguely 2-foot wide by 12-foot long boards that were then sent to a finishing mill for further refinements. That was located town of Madeira, 54 miles away and 4,000 feet lower in elevation. The roads were bad, the wagons were slow. The trip took 2.5 days. It would have cost far too much to build the railroad through to Madeira, so instead the lumber company went with the economical option and built a device known as a flume. A flume is a V-shaped wooden trough, about 5 feet wide, 3 feet deep. That's on a gradual incline and filled with water. They'd simply set the lumber into the flume by hand and send it floating to Madeira. At the time it was constructed, it was one of the largest wooden structures in the world. It cost $402,000 to build in 1899. Adjusted for modern inflation, that's $14.7 million today. But it cut the time of the trip from 2.5 days by horse and wagon down to only 12 hours. Stationed along the flume were men called flume herders. Their job was to ensure that the lumber kept moving. It was dangerous work, sometimes 40 to 100 feet off the ground, on a 1-foot wide board nailed to the side of the flume as a walkway with no handrail. Once the lumber reached Madeira, it would be cut and planed into accurate shapes and sizes in a process known as finishing. From there, it would be loaded onto the Southern Pacific Railroad for shipment to the worldwide lumber market. The water for the flume was put into holding tanks, then sold to farmers for irrigation. But our sugar pine employees didn't have any benefits. They did have an interesting form of travel with a flume boat ride. A flume boat was a crude raft they'd make out of the pieces of lumber. Then they'd simply climb in, sit down, and hold on for dear life. As the grade of the flume at Sugar Pine was so steep, they'd regularly reach speeds of up to 50 miles an hour. Once they reached Madeira, the boat was taken from them, dismantled, and sold as lumber. They spent the rest of their day off in town before finding their own way back to work, as the flume could only flow in one direction. Now, up to this point in the trip, the number 10 has been a really quiet locomotive. She hasn't had to do much of anything as we've been going downhill ever since we left the station. However, we're now about to begin climbing up a 9% grade, and she's going to have to work quite a bit harder. You'll hear a change in the exhaust signature as the engineer will demand steam to get us up the hill, and the fireman will work to supply it. And also at this point, we've entered into the very bottom of the Lewis Creek Canyon, 500 feet below the station where we started out. At the top of the grade, we're going to cross over the western fork of Lewis Creek, which is one of 5 bodies of water that fed the mill and flume at Sugar Pine. stop and for approximately 10 minutes take on water in the locomotive. During that time, you're more than welcome to walk around and stretch your legs. Six by the 5 types of trees mentioned earlier. You can find any pine cones or nice looking sticks here in the forest. We call them leave 'em rights. We got a little bathroom and a trash can to the right of the train up near the locomotive if you need them. I'd like to ask everyone, please stay seated until we come to a full and complete stop, signaled by one short blast on the whistle. Thank you.
So back in the old days.
It's usually only about 10 seconds or less, so please stay in your seats. Thank you.
Yeah, they made it
That comment.
Oh, we just love to know more about like to clarify.
so stuff doesn't fall out.
Maybe like that.
Hopefully, the doctor delivered its comment.
Oh, yes, that
Hey.
we say like, oh, yeah, but I'm coming on the road.
Your conductor for the last hour. We hope you have enjoyed the trip. If you didn't, my name is Bob. I'd like to ask everyone please stay seated until we come to a full and complete stop at the station. Again, signaled by one short blast on the whistle. As you disembark, for your safety, just please make your way back across the station side of the yellow line like we were before. We're going to run the locomotive around, get ready for the next trip. I really don't want to run you over while we do it. So please make sure you're safely behind that yellow line. If you'd like to tell us how we did today, please feel free to fill out that review form we gave you when you checked in. 5 is good, 1 is bad. We do appreciate all feedback, good, bad, or otherwise. Finally, I want to give a shout out to our locomotive crew this trip. Engineer Aaron Peck, Fireman Cole Lawrence. If it weren't for them coming to work, we couldn't make this trip, and it's awful hot up there. Let's give them a round of applause.
I believe they just go and not go.
And then he'll go back and get pictures.
Okay, now we go.